Hey, we're live. Yet another Ask Me Anything session. This time I have no guest, nobody to help me out, so it's me and only me. And I'm here to answer any question you might have. And I might sometimes my answers might be I have no idea. So let's get going. You start typing your questions. I already have a couple of questions over here. There is no script, nothing prepared. It's only questions. So let's start with T. Lindeza. I see NA10 getting traction in automating AI agents. Could you create a video with your thoughts on the tool? Yes, I can create the video. I have only superficial experience with it, so I cannot comment on it right now. But I can definitely create a video. I actually already put it in my to-do list. It's coming, and I cannot say when, but I will do it, I promise. Okay. Now from Akiva. Does Vercel replace part of the DevOps toolbox? If so, which part? So the DevOps toolbox is an abstract term, right? Kind of DevOps can be anything, right? So I'm not sure how to answer about the replacement, but what I can answer is that many teams, I would even say majority teams, companies, what's not, are really focused for a while now, not a long while, but for a while now, in creating some kind of developer platform, right? And the goal of those developer platforms is to simplify operational part of what developers do, right? How can we deploy our applications easily? How can we observe what's happening with our applications easily? How can we do this? How can we do that, right? So it is basically all about simplifying, or actually converting expert knowledge of something into services that can be consumed by developers. Now, those platforms can be done by third parties, or it can be done by you, right? And both have their pros and cons. And Vercel would be in the category of third party, right? It helps you simplifies quite a lot of things. It makes it very easy to deploy your code, just have it running and a few other things. And it's awesome. I like it. Now, so what it replaces how you build your applications, how you package your applications, how you deploy your applications, how you observe what's happening with your applications, and all that on a developer level, right? So everything I said so far that it helps with, that's not you as ops, but how would you create those services for developers? Now, the problem with Vercel, not a problem, but potential problem with Vercel and all others is, does that what third-party platforms like that are offering you, is that what you need, right? If that is 100% of what you need for certain workloads, I strongly recommend use it, right? Now, if that is 90% of what you need, then it's a bad solution because they're not flexible, right? You cannot say, oh, I don't want to do this, I want to do that, something, or what's not, right? So I would even recommend that people should explore platforms like Vercel first, and if that's what you need, great, use it, right? Don't waste your time on building your own stuff by assembling different tools, formats, whatsoever. Now, in larger organizations, that is almost never the case. Those platforms almost never fit what companies need because everybody's a bit different, even though we shouldn't be. But if it does fit, yeah, it's great. Use it. I would put, there are many, just to be clear, there are many other similar tools from hyperscalers like AWS. Actually, AWS not that much, but Google and Azure offer you something similar. In Azure, that would be Azure Container Apps. In Google, that would be Google Cloud Run. And there are also many other smaller players like Vercel. I feel that it all started, I don't know how long ago, maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago with Heroku, right? Heroku was the first Vercel-like service, and it was absolutely awesome. But it didn't work. It didn't work because of those differences of what we really need and what they think that we need. But if it works for you, great. Okay, from Mari. So keep them coming. What is your preferred method for updating GitOps repo with latest version tags, etc.? CI in app repo that pushes commits to GitOps repo? push versus pull, registry watcher style. So there are quite a lot of tools that do that for us. There is kind of almost an explosion of tools. Let's call them promotions. There is one from Acuity, Argo. There is from Argo community itself. I think it's called Argo CD Updater or something like that. There is one from Codefresh. I'm not using any of those. I think that they're all lacking something, missing something. So I personally tend to, in my CI pipelines, which I cannot not have, just to be clear. So none of those tools can replace it fully. I still need to have my workflows because I need to build stuff, I need to push stuff, I need to test stuff, and so on and so forth. So in my pipelines, I'm still doing it old-fashioned way. I just do YQ CLI that replaces tag in a manifest, pushes it back to Git, and then Argo CD does the pull, right? So the question whether push versus pull, it's push of a manifest, but it's always pull from a tool that will actually synchronize it into the cluster. I don't like the idea of keeping, if by registry meaning container image registry, I don't like the idea of packaging manifests as images. I think that reduces visibility, which I feel goes almost against the whole idea. So I keep everything in Git, I push them through my workflows, and I let Argo CD or Flux do the job of synchronizing. And then I think that the most difficult part is what happens, how do we detect that application is rolled out, and how do we execute something else after that, right? Some other workflow, which is a challenge by itself. Okay. I cannot pronounce FI, I think, or FL, I'm not sure. FL. How can I explain to upper management that the DevOps team is an antipattern? I've tried with books, articles, and internal case studies. They don't get it. The DevOps is idea how we can... I think that we need to distinguish ideas from practical implementations. And I don't think that we should form teams around ideas, but more about roles and what they do. And DevOps is an idea. How can we bridge the gap between development and operations? And I would say that actually I would even define it, how do we enable teams to be self-sufficient so that they can do everything related to the project that they're in charge of, right? And that means writing code and doing operations as well. And I don't think that DevOps team makes any sense, because that would be the same thing as if I would say, hey, there is we have an agile team, right? No, you don't have agile team. Nobody has a dedicated agile team. Everybody is practicing agile or not, right? But not as a team. What I would suggest is, if you want to form the team, make an SRE team. We know what they do. Make a platform engineering team. That's also technical. We know what they do, hopefully. I mean, maybe many don't, but I can define it at least, but not DevOps. Now, I don't know how to explain it. I think a good explanation for the DevOps team is comparing it with full stack engineers, right? Unless you're a very, very small organization, that never worked, because we cannot really have people that know everything about everything. And I feel that that's where companies go with DevOps team. Oh, join our company and you will be a DevOps engineer that knows everything about everything, and you will be terrible at absolutely everything because you claim to know everything about everything. Bad idea. I don't know how to explain it. If you want, invite me to one of your calls, and then I can have a fight with your manager or whomever, you upper management. That might help. There you go. Just ping me on Slack or LinkedIn or somewhere. Okay. Oh, wait. Before I go, actually, we have a sponsor here, so I need to shut out. Otherwise, they're going to complain that I always forget about telling about sponsor. Sponsor is Codefresh. Codefresh is the sponsor, and there was already a question. GitOps in a box, GitOps as a service, and they do the promotions, the part that I was talking about before. I even have a link somewhere. Let me find it. Oh, where did they put it? Here we go. Codefresh.io, right? So Codefresh is a sponsor of this stream. Check them out. If you want GitOps that goes beyond what Argo City does, it includes promotions and figures out how to connect everything together. It looks really good, and I must say that I rarely say that something looks good, but this looks really good, and I really encourage everybody to try it out. It's basically everything about GitOps, and especially the focus of promotion. How do we move releases from one environment to another? Check them out. Big thanks to Codefresh for sponsoring the video. Let's go back to your questions. If I remember where I was, which one did they answer? Okay, here we go. From Burnt W, why does Crossplane composition pipeline mode not support depends on key kind of feature between steps out of the box? It does support depends on in a way, but probably very different way than you're used to. So if you look at from the perspective of other tools that, hey, I need to execute this, and that, and when I'm finished, I'm done, right? Crossplane is very different. Crossplane follows Kubernetes logic, right? And that logic is the logic of eventual consistency. And this is not specific to Crossplane. This is specific to anything in Kubernetes, right? You're like when you're defining your application. Let's say that you have a deployment that will create a replica set that will create pods, and those pods should mount secrets. Let's say, right? So pods mount secrets. Now, using the logic outside Kubernetes, you would say, hey, pod depends on a secret, right? I cannot even start creating a pod before I create a secret. Right? That would be the depends on relationship. And we don't do those things in Kubernetes because there is no need to do those things. That just complicates and causes issues, and we just don't need it, right? Everything will be eventually consistent. If it's not, I mean, there might be some edge cases, but more often than not, you might be doing things the wrong way, independently of which tool you're using, right? Now, what Crossplane does have, which is somehow maybe similar to depends on, is that when you're composing resources, you might say, you know what, this this field in this resource, this thing here is a data that I'm going to fetch from some other resource, right? And you can consider that like depends on, because you can say, hey, for my application to connect to the database, I need to fill in the create environment variable with the address of the database, right? And so I will get that information from the resource that manages the database. And if the resource is not there, then I will try again later, and I will try again later, just as the example of pods and secrets. And when the resource is there and the data is there, then I will going to get it and put it over there, right? So the depends on logic in crossplane compositions, to be more precise, is more based on the idea that you might depend on data from something, right? And when you think about it, if you don't depend on any information from anything else, there is no good reason why would you wait for it or anything like that. There is no good reason why would you orchestrate things in a way that, oh, this needs to happen before that happens. We don't do that because Kubernetes does not do that, right? And I think that you shouldn't either, right? I mean, you might argue that maybe Kubernetes' way of doing things is not the correct one, but then cool. Kubernetes is not a good platform for you. That's fine. Okay, what else? From Francisco. What is, in your opinion, would be the near future of DevOps related to AI development in the next 10 years? Oh, Francisco, I cannot even figure out or predict what will happen the next year. 10 years? Oh, I honestly don't know. I have no idea. It's moving so fast that I don't think that anybody can really predict. The part that I will say is that AI will continue the evolution that was happening long before AI, and that's that things become easier, right? You don't need any more much skill to do things that were today that were complicated 10 years ago. And as a result of those things, the bar is getting raised, and then we are not focusing anymore on easy things, and we focus on more complicated things, right? And AI is going in that direction, right? I see it as for the near future, it's more like a junior developer, right? Right now, I cannot if I hire somebody in my company, that person is junior, I cannot let that person push changes directly to the mainline and deploy to production and so on and so forth. I need to review the pull requests until I get enough trust in that person and say, okay, now you can go, right? Kind of like, I don't need to review your stuff. You can do it by yourself. We are not there yet with AI, right? I don't trust it at all. It helps me a lot. It speeds my work a lot, but cannot be trusted. When are we going to, if ever, we're going to enter the phase where I can let AI do the stuff? I cannot say, right? It's very hard to predict. But the future with AI is the same as future with anything else we had in the past. It will help us in a way that we can focus on some other more complex things, right? And we are all moving towards the world in which we are more managers and pull request reviewers. We are supervisors of other people, and soon we will be supervisors of AI, right? That's our job. Sounds good to me. Okay, from Joano, do you recommend Sops operator? Any advice on that? I'm developing an app that makes pull requests to modify manifests, and it should include encrypted secrets. I wasn't aware until this very moment that there is a Sops operator. If there is, it's something very new, because there wasn't Sops operator last time I checked, maybe half a year ago, or something like that, right? So if there is one, I didn't know about it, right? I was very disappointed with Sops in the context of Kubernetes in the past, simply because it didn't have operator, it didn't have good operator. And all my needs were covered by external secrets operator, right? I do think that secrets, I had a period where I did not think that, but now I think that unless we're talking about very small setup, secrets should be in secret store, whether it's Google, Azure, AWS Vault, HashiVault, or whatever. And I need something to pull those secrets, and I need something to push secrets generated inside of cluster back there, right? So push and pull mechanism, that's what I need. Now, Sops without operator is trash for Kubernetes. Operator, I haven't tried it yet. I'll put a note to myself to try it out. So I don't know yet whether it's any good. Okay, let's see next. No filter. Anything you write goes on the screen. Hello, there any experience with the Cilium Gateway API class? Thanks. Yeah, Gateway API is still in development, so I wouldn't rush into adopting it. But Cilium works pretty well, considering that Gateway API is in development. It works well. I can recommend it. Yes, go for it. If you need to choose between Cilium and Istio, which would you use and why? So you shouldn't be choosing. The question is not whether you should use Cilium or Istio, right? The question is whether you should use Cilium or Cilium and Istio, right? Because you need CNI in your Kubernetes cluster. It can be Cilium, it can be something else. It's not Istio, right? Istio is not networking at that level, right? So you need at least rudimentary networking in your Kubernetes cluster, and Cilium is one of the CNIs. It is the most commonly used CNI right now. So you will most likely have Cilium in your cluster. Actually, you might be having Cilium without even knowing that Cilium is there, right? Simply, it's CNI, it's required. No cluster can be used without CNI, and Istio is not that. And then the question is really, should you put Istio on top of Cilium or whichever other CNI you might choose? And my answer to that is, if you reach the limits of what Cilium does, right? Istio is much more feature-rich. It does many more things that Cilium doesn't, but you have Cilium no matter what. unless you choose a different CNI. So my recommendation is always use Cilium alone. And then if you see that there are things that you cannot do with it, that you need to do, then think about service mesh on top of it, right? Because Cilium is a CNI first of all. It also does some of the things that service mesh does. So really, don't put anything on top of Cilium unless just because somebody told you. Check whether you reach the limit of what your CNI does, right? And then put something on top, any service mesh, including Istio. Okay, Ganesh, for a fresher, how much salary we expected? Depends on the size of the company and where you live, right? In United States, that would be 6 digits, right? In Europe, that would be below 6 digits. It would be, as a fresher, it would be 5 digits. In Asia and South America and Africa, we're probably talking about lower than that. It's low 5 digits, right? It really depends where you are. Actually, it depends greatly where you are if you're working for a local company or if you're working for a big company that has offices around the world, right? Now, if you work in a country, if you live in a country where salaries are lower, then I would strongly suggest looking for startups, right? Remote startups that do not make big differentiation between salaries, right? There are quite a few startups that say, hey, this is what we pay no matter where you are, and then you're in good position, right? But I cannot answer how much to expect because it depends where you are, excluding those startups. Anything between low 5 to high 6 digits even. If you got around Silicon Valley, San Francisco area, you're 6 digits for sure. Okay, Shamil, I think that I pronounced it well. I'm thinking how to organize progressive delivery. Are Argo rollouts valid choice, or I should explore something else? Yes, Argo rollouts are a good choice. They're a good choice if you're talking about rolling out applications that, among other things, use deployments. If you don't use Kubernetes deployments, then I don't think that Argo rollouts work, but most people use deployment. That's not the only thing, but one of the things. And then, yeah, Argo rollouts works great. It's amazing. I love it. Go for it. Don't try to create your own solution unless you really used all the options and then you say, I can do better, but then open source it, right? From Flavio. Is there a way to create secret on different clusters from a control plane cluster like Crossplane using external secrets operator without the application cluster access directly the key vault? I'm not sure I understood the last part, without application clusters access direct to the vault, right? So you can push secrets. So what I do very often is that I have multiple clusters, and let's say here I have Crossplane, and Crossplane generates some resources, let's say a database, and it generates a secret, and then I would use external secrets operator that's relatively new to I think it's push secret kind, I believe, to push that secret to some secret store, key vault, and then I have external secret in some other place that would pull that secret, right? But in order to pull the secret from that cluster, you need to be able to access the vault. If you're not, there is no physical way. I mean, it's a good thing that you cannot pull without access to the key vault, right? Otherwise, it would be completely insecure. So you need to have credentials in that cluster. That's not the credentials. Your application does not have to have access to the key vault, but external secrets has to have access to the key vault to pull the secret. Now, if that's unacceptable for you to have anywhere in your cluster credentials to pull secrets, then your only other option is, like if you're using Crossplane, you can, from that control plane, you can use Kubernetes object and just take the data, what I was explaining earlier when I was answering about the depends on. You can get the data you need and generate Kubernetes secret in the different cluster. But that's less secure, just to be clear, right? Because then you need to have capability from one cluster to access the other cluster, which is definitely less secure. So generate the secret if you cannot access Key Vault from that cluster. And you can, if you use object from Crossplane, I'm saying Crossplane only because you mentioned it, you can point that object to generate Kubernetes resource anywhere you want, as long as you have access to that something. How would you handle promotions between environments using Flux? I'm not happy with any of the tools that I've seen so far, and I haven't seen all, so I might be wrong. So my promotions are handled in very artisanal way, and that's that in the pipelines or workflows where I build stuff and test stuff and so on and so forth, I clone the code, use YQ to change the YAML, and push it back to the repo, and then Flux takes it over. Easy. In my case, each environment is a different cluster. That's from Vercel, and they sync to different branches in Git. How can I make it easy for devs to promote their apps from test to pre-live to live? Let me read it again. In my case, each environment is a different cluster and they sync to different branches in Git. Let me start by saying that I really dislike the idea of using branches as a permanent description of a permanent environment, right? I would rather use different directories or different repos than different branches. But yeah, that would be a separate discussion. How can you make it easy for devs to promote their apps from test to pre-live to live? One way is what I'm doing in pipelines. Just when you run your pipeline, just whatever is the criteria for promotion, you just modify the manifest, push it back. It's not that hard. If that's too artisanal for you, there is Cargo for Vacuity. Cargo does the promotions and it uses branches. So, but it will not use your branches, just to be clear. It will generate its own branches. There is Argo CD image updater. I might be wrong about the name. And there is a Codefresh one. And now that I mentioned Codefresh, that reminds me that I should probably do a shout out again to Codefresh because they're a sponsor. They give me money to buy Coke so that I have my sugar and caffeine. There we go. So, Codefresh, sponsor of the video. The question, how do you do promotion? Well, one of the options is through Codefresh. They have the big emphasis of what they're doing is actually promotion. You can do drag and drop. That's easy for developers. You know, you have just boxes and say, I want this release to be dragged and dropped to this environment. You can do it through code. You can do it through pipeline. It's awesome. Try it out. Codefresh.io. Thank you for sponsoring. And that at the same time gives one of many answers to that question. So, cool. Let's go back to comments. Where was I? Now I lost with the thread. Where was I? Okay, so that's more from Vercel. That's going back to the question, handle promotion. In my case, each environment is a different cluster and they sync to different. No, actually, I did answer that one. I believe. Okay, I'm starting my journey in Kubernetes and Docker. Any advice? Docker is important for two reasons, probably different reasons than what people might think. Oh, I can remove this screen. Look at me. First, it's important to understand how containers work, right? With Docker or with any of the other tools, there are many other tools, and it's important to understand how to build and push container images. Which again, you can do with Docker or you can do with something else. Now, when it comes to actual usage, right, you're probably not going to use Docker much. You might be using Docker in your workflows or your laptop to build and push images, but hopefully not to run applications, right? Most of us stopped running applications, at least not seriously. With Docker, we use Kubernetes, which I guess that KB means Kubernetes, I hope. So there is no Docker in Kubernetes. Hopefully nobody has it anymore. And we're out of Docker, right? Docker is used now mostly to build and push images. That's what it does. And Kubernetes is a beast in itself, right? The advice I would give you is forget about Kubernetes ecosystem. It's so big and it's so overwhelming. Learn Kubernetes alone, right? Kind of the core Kubernetes, the basics, kind of services, pods, replica sets, deployments, and so on and so forth, scaling, this and that. I wouldn't even probably touch the ecosystem for months, first months, or maybe even half a year, maybe even a year, right? Later on, you will realize that actually nobody uses Kubernetes as is. Everybody extends Kubernetes to that with the ecosystem. But if you miss those basics, you might be in a really bad position. I would even actually go further and say, forget about Docker and forget about Kubernetes. Focus on Linux, focus on shell. If you don't understand how Linux works, if you're not proficient doing stuff in shell, none of those things will make sense. It will look like it makes sense, it will not. Okay, so from Vercel, something like Argo for Flux would be awesome. Yeah, Cargo is very, very focused on Argo CD, but other, I'm not sure actually now when I think about it, whether there is something that is, all the tools that I know are somehow integrated with Argo CD. You could use, theoretically, probably, maybe, Cargo without Argo CD, but then you would be missing a lot of features, right? The problem with Flux, really, I think that Flux is a better project than Cargo. It is designed better, the architecture is better, it makes so much more sense. That being said, the gravity is in Argo CD, right? So all the all the special solutions are coming to Argo CD first. And then, if you're lucky, you get it in Cargo, which is very unfortunate. I feel bad for Cargo, but simply from the user perspective or number of users, Argo CD is winning. And from the contribution perspective, it is winning big time. So much more contributions, much more related projects, and so on and so forth. But something like Argo for Flux, yeah, it would be amazing. You should contact Stefan, something like the Prodan. He's the one behind the project. He will probably tell you that he's overwhelmed and he would like you to contribute something like Argo for Flux. Okay, from Akiva. What impressed you most, surprised you most in KubeCon London? I haven't, to be honest, I was never more busy than in KubeCon London, and I haven't had time really to even to spend more than 15 minutes in the expo area, because expo area is really, that's where people make money, but that's where you see the real deal. So I haven't attended many talks, and I haven't been even spent more than 15 minutes in the expo area. So I don't know even what happened in KubeCon, to be honest. I was just running from one place to another, doing my talks, meeting with whomever I was supposed to meet, and so on and so forth. That I need to check myself what happened in London to be able to answer that question. It was a madhouse, for me at least. So I have no idea. Nothing surprised me because I haven't seen much. What I can say, and this is more general, not necessarily specific to KubeCon London, is that I think that there is not much innovation happening anymore in around Kubernetes, and that's a good thing, right? We had that, the curve, and then we had explosion of projects, and there were, for anything that you can imagine, there were 50 different solutions. And now I think that we are going to the mature phase. Okay, we're picking the winners from all those solutions and trying to make them stable, to make them safe and production ready, and so on and so forth. So I don't think that there is much surprising happening in around Kubernetes. And that's a good thing, right? That means that we are not kids anymore playing with random toys all the time. Like, this is serious business now. Okay, so from Alexander, how would you start implementing an IDP? Start small and iterate fast with GitHub, order forms via actions, or go big bang and spend longer setting up backstage crossplane? Oh, that that largely depends on your experience, right? Like in my case, I worked for a long time with Kubernetes. Kubernetes to me is easy, right? And as such, actually, building stuff with crossplane, or doesn't have to be crossplane, it can be CRO, there are other solutions, is simply easier than anything else, right? For me. Now, if you're not comfortable with Kubernetes, I would definitely say don't even try to use crossplane, right? If you're not comfortable, if you're not experienced with Kubernetes, don't go there. It's going to overwhelm you. It's going to kill you because it assumes certain level of experience with Kubernetes itself. Now, I do think that, okay, let me actually answer it in a different way. If you're building IDP, or if you're building any type of platform, we need to have some kind of a control plane, and we need to have some kind of API, assuming that we live in this century, right? So you should start by thinking about the architecture, and that architecture should be the same architecture as AWS or Azure or Google or Vercel or any of them. All the platforms that you might be using have the same high-level architecture, and that architecture is build the API, right? So that people can request whatever they need, and build some kind of control plane that will do whatever needs to be done for that to happen, right? Now, that doesn't have to be Kubernetes, just to be clear, and it can be something else. I think Kubernetes is the best choice because it's some sort of standard, and because many things are baked in and makes many of the things easier, but doesn't have to be Kubernetes. But I do insist that don't waste your time of fiddling with files and order forms and what's or not. I think that's a waste of time, unless that's the only thing you know how to do. Focus on building APIs and focus building on control plane, right? That will listen to the events on that API and do something, whatever that something is, whatever you need. So you don't have to use crossplane. You can try CRO, right? But use Kubernetes. Don't waste time. Kubernetes is here to stay. It's a standard. You will find it hard at first, maybe, but easier in the long run. And now Backstage. Backstage is the only open source player in town, right? It has gravity. It pulls everything, sucks everything in. It's very painful. It's horrifyingly horrible. But that's the only one we have right now, right? The alternative to Backstage is either to go commercial. If you can pay for it, great. Use Port, for example. I really like Port. But if you're not willing to pay for it as a service, then the only alternative to Backstage that I know of is that you building it yourself. And trust me, you're going to spend more time and cry much more if you go and build it yourself from scratch. That's worst option. Okay, TTT, you mentioned you're in favor of Git committing fully rendered YAMLs before applying them. Do you recommend that using Argo application setter and crossplane composite resources? Yes. So I tend to distinguish two things, right? And I'm answering this only because you mentioned crossplane, right? What's happening in a cluster, how we build controllers, I don't insist that being pure YAML. To be 100% clear, I don't build my crossplane compositions using pure YAML. I don't, and I will never do that, right? Because controllers are applications, essentially, running in your cluster. Now, if you're talking about what you're committing to Git, yes, I think you should commit rendered YAMLs, always. And the reason is very simple. Two reasons. First, not very important one, the tools you're using to synchronize that are going to have easier time doing it because it's very easy. This is what I want. Don't think about it much, right? Kind of just put it to a cluster. More important reason is that a big reason for using tools like GitOps is that we want to have the desired state in a declarative format stored in Git, right? YAML is declarative. Helm is not declarative, right? I'm not saying Helm is bad. Just to be clear, it's not declarative, right? And if I ask you, and I'm using Helm as example, okay, tell me what the author wanted to do. What is the intention? What is the desired state? You could not answer that to me, right? Because you would need to go through the templates and figure out if this, then that, and do some mental calculation of 5 hours to figure out what somebody wanted to do, right? YAML is easy to read, right? It's easy to understand. Now, when I say YAML, again, to be clear, I don't write YAML directly. I use KCL. You can use Helm. You can use YTT. You can use anything you want. But the final outcome, before it is synchronized into the cluster, in my case, is always YAML. So I use KCL. I just do KCL run, generates YAML, and then I push it to Git and I'm done. Right? And I know exactly what was supposed to be running and where it's supposed to be running. Okay. From Maun, managed load balancer provided by cloud. Yes, to both. So I don't want to deal with load balancers myself. I always use LB of a cloud provider, but that LB, in my case, is created by ingress. Right? When you install ingress, whichever you're using, Traffic, Nginx, this or that, it will create a LB for you. So yes, my answer is managed LB managed by ingress. Or ingress managing LB from a cloud provider. I'm not sure whether that was your question, but that's what I understood, and that was my answer. That is my answer. Okay. Oh, I'm getting tired. Oh, I'm getting warmed up. Okay. What would you choose for insurance healthcare company with a lot of small microservices on Openshift versus Tanzu? Now, if the only two options you're giving me is Openshift or Tanzu, I will give you the answer that is opposite of the answer I was giving so far. And that's, if those are your only two options, Openshift. Tanzu is busted. It's gone, right? VMware, after it was purchased, does not care about Kubernetes. It is focusing on cloud, not CloudFormation, CF, whatever the name is. Basically, Tanzu, VMware, wherever they are now, removed Kubernetes from Tanzu. It's not keeping it up to date. It's not maintaining. They don't care about it, right? So Openshift is maintained. There is a company behind it. They care about it. Don't use products that companies behind those products don't care about. Use Openshift. Now, Openshift is the last option I would choose, to be clear. There are better options, but if my only alternative to Openshift is Tanzu, until a few months ago, I would say Tanzu without doubt, zero doubt, go Tanzu. But now that Broadcom completely messed it up, Tanzu is no more, go Openshift. What from Deluso, same person, what would you choose for a corporate with a lot of microservices? Oh, no, that's the same one. Okay. Containerd nowadays, yes. I mean, in Kubernetes, I guess that was my comment on, that's a comment on my comment to Docker. From Joshua, but it's just a runtime. Docker is still relevant. Kilts is an orchestrator. Yeah, Docker is relevant to build and push stuff. Yes, right? To build and push stuff that is being built and pushed outside Kubernetes. And it's still relevant for those, and me included, that locally on a laptop run Kubernetes in Docker, right? But Docker Compose to me is gone, right? I see no purpose of it, and I'm willing to fight whomever thinks otherwise, unless it's a very, very small company. From Minase, Argo CD, should you deploy CRDs for an operative separately, even though it runs Helm template? Yes. Yes, you should deploy. No, actually, depends on a use case. Often, Argo CD will detect CRDs and apply them first before applying the rest of stuff. So you might not have to separate it. There are quite a few cases where it gets completely confused. In my case, in case of Crossplane, gets confused all the time, and then it's a complete nightmare. And that's one of the things I dislike the most about Argo CD. But I wouldn't separate it. I wouldn't separate it unless you run into same problems as I run, right? Okay, from Joshua. Any personal preference on which is one of the better operators for interacting with AWS? Example, Crossplane, Pulumi, Terraform, etc. So, Pulumi and Terraform, certainly not. Completely not. Now, actually, completely not as operator inside of Kubernetes, just to be 100% clear. Now, if you use them outside Kubernetes, great, cool, works, no problems, right? Inside Kubernetes, no, because Kubernetes is designed with the idea that it does reconciliation loop with drift detection and reconciliation on each individual resource, right? And if you put like Terraform project inside Kubernetes, there is no way that I know of that you can split it into individual resources so that Kubernetes can do what it does best, reconciliation, right? It's all one big blob of resources and treat it all as a single entity, and that just fails miserably, right? So I would suggest don't do Pulumi, don't do Terraform in Kubernetes. I mean, I'm not following Pulumi. Maybe they changed how they operate, so there is asterisk there. So outside Kubernetes, yeah, Pulumi, Terraform, do it. In Kubernetes, don't do Crossplane. If you don't like Crossplane for whatever reason, do CRO. If you don't like CRO for whatever reason, do Cluster API. Do whichever solution you find that treats that synchronizes into Kubernetes each resource separately, so that Kubernetes can do the loop of each resource separately. Don't do one big blob, one Terraform project in Kubernetes. It's just a very bad idea. You will be better off outside Kubernetes with that same thing. Ooh. Okay, more. Thank you very much. What branching strategy is better fit for 3 environments? Develop, staging, prod. If you can't perform ephemeral environments for pull requests or with testing on staging. Now, I tend to separate. There are repositories for applications, and there are, call it GitOps repos or environment repositories, right? Where you have the references to manifests with specific values and what's or not. I'm assuming you're talking about the latter, right? Kind of where you keep your final manifests, not the base manifests. Bases are in application repos, but final manifests. I don't like the idea of using branches that are, in general, this is nothing to do with GitOps. Branches that are not merged eventually into mainline. I don't like that idea. And if you separate environments in different branches, you will never merge them into mainline because they're different. They're different. Staging and production is never the same. Like host name will be different. Something will be different, right? So those are not mergeable. I strongly recommend that you do directories in a single repo, mainline, or different repositories, one for each environment. Either of the two works fine. You can have branches as something temporary that you review, would do what's or not, and then when you merge it to the mainline, then the actual thing happens. I don't like branches for that. And people dislike that part about me. Everybody argues against me on that one, but there you go. More from Joshua. Joshua, branching is bad, separate environments with a configuration folders. Exactly. Thank you, Joshua. That's validation. Do you recommend wearing a kilt during a talk? I think that's for those of you who are not aware. I wore a kilt in my talk, and during the whole day in KubeCon in London. It was part of the background stories that it's a long story. The lessons learned is don't go drinking with a Scottish person and commit to something that you were not aware that you're committing. Anyway, I had to wear a kilt. I wear a kilt, and I do recommend it. People look at you weirdly and stuff like that, so maybe not recommend it from that perspective, but it's extremely, extremely comfortable. If you ignore the looks and stuff like that, I must say that I love kilt. It's the most comfortable thing I wore ever. Apart from maybe, ever. Exactly. It's amazing. I love it. From Joshua, Helm staging values, YAML, Helm production values. Exactly. That's what I was referring to. Separate it to different files, directories, what's or not, and it works like a charm. Minase, cloud-specific ingress versus agnostic ingress like traffic contour. No, but so I don't like I don't like the idea of cloud-specific ingress because I don't see the point of having cloud-specific ingress. I like my ingress to work anywhere, right? And that's traffic or contour. Yeah, I never used more than for 15 minutes any cloud-specific ingress. I don't see point in doing that. And I don't like being locked in that way, right? I'm okay using load balancer, but because that's no work from my side, but I like my stuff being more generic, unless there is a very good reason for that. From Joshua, we use Terraform, especially, specifically Terragrant, for building all our AKS clusters, but we want to use something like Crossplane for deploying some of the stateful bits, RDS, SQS, etc., queues via Argo CD. Yeah, go for it. Terraform is great, just not great for in Kubernetes. Terragrant works great. I'm biased. Crossplane is my project, so yeah. If you want to try Crossplane, if you want to try Crossplane, ping me on LinkedIn or not Twitter. I'm not using Twitter, or Blue Sky or Slack, anywhere. If you need any help, I'll jump in. I promise. It also helps making ephemeral environments so much easier. It's all contained. I agree. How to not build container images twice when promoting between environments. So ignoring the technology used, right? Promoting between environments is changing the tags. So if I go back to Joshua's example, right? So in Joshua's example, there is staging values YAML, there is production values YAML, and there is dev values YAML, right? Those are different values of the same Helm chart, right? And you would build an image, and the tag would be 1.2.3, right? You built it with a specific tag, and you pushed it to a registry, right? And then you modify the first values YAML and say, now this is from 1.2.2, 1.2.3. Then you do testing, you do whatever you do, and then you change the next one, and so on and so forth, right? You're just changing the tag in your manifest. There is no need to build container images 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. And please don't do that. Because first of all, you're wasting time, you're wasting compute, and second, there is no good reason for it. And the third or fourth is that you're not then deploying to production what you tested, right? Because it's a different image, right? It looks the same, but it's not the same. There is no guarantee it's going to be the same. Just build and push it once, change the tag in different manifests depending on how you promote from one place to another. Okay, you build it once, you build it once. That's Joshua, I think, answering to the previous one. We build a merge request each commit, and then when merge to master, we have another CI stage that tags that existing artifact, the image in ECR, so it's consistent. Yes, I forgot about that part. You can create multiple tags if that works for you of the same image, if that helps. I was talking about application code, not GitOps. Cool, now I got it. And one more, Joshua. I'm going to check out Crossplane. Thanks for the offer. Yeah, literally, ping me. I have open calendar. That's actually valid for everybody. I have open calendar policy. If there's something I can help, I will send you, just find me somehow. I'm easy to find. I will send you a calendar link, and we can have a chat. That's a service to the community. Think of it that way. Do you have a service mesh you recommend these days? If you have to use service mesh, if Cilium is not good enough for you, I still prefer Linkerd. I still like it, even though I think I'm losing the battle. It's the same thing like me preferring Flux. Istio is probably winning. Actually, I think that Cilium eventually will eventually get all the things that anybody ever wanted from service mesh, and then since you will be using it as CNI, then service meshes will be completely replaced by Cilium. But yeah, if you need something on top, I prefer Linkerd. Istio is fine as well. Okay, we have 5 more minutes. Last chance for questions. Type fast. I looked into Crossplane a while back to replace the Flux Terraform controller Tingle, but I was disappointed about improper status reporting. Thankfully, Stefan fixed it with custom health checks. yeah. I mean, Crossplane is evolving. It's very different today than it was a year ago, and it was very different a year ago than it was 2 years ago. We are advancing, right? Especially now, you should check version 2 that was announced. I mean, it's public for a month now, and it was announced in KubeCon, and not many, few very, very important changes. From Tiago, did you hear about Tofu controller, a Flux CD extension to work with Terraform via GitOps? I don't think it makes no sense for me to use Terraform projects. And I repeat, you can use Terraform in some other way, but if you're talking about putting a whole project as one Terraform resource in Kubernetes, it makes no sense. Don't do it. Please don't do it. Can I use Crossplane to deploy it on on-prem? I assume that the question is not whether you can run Crossplane in on-prem, because you can, but whether you can manage on-prem resources. The answer is, so there are 2 parts in Crossplane, right? There are Crossplane managed resources. Those are the AWS provider, Azure provider, VMware provider, for example, if you're on-prem, and so on and so forth. And then there is much more important part of Crossplane, that's compositions, right? That's the thing that allows you to create your own interfaces, to decide what happens, when it happens, and so on and so forth. Now, you can use compositions with Crossplane providers or without, right? As long as you have a Kubernetes resource, no matter where it comes from, no matter whether it comes from Crossplane or elsewhere, if you have a Kubernetes resource that does what you need it to do, right? Or to be more precise, Kubernetes resource that interacts with the API you want to interact, wherever that API is, on-prem or cloud or somewhere else, then the answer is yes. If not, you can create your own provider for that. It's relatively easy. I would need to know what exactly you're doing on-prem to give a more concrete answer. 2 more minutes. From Mircea, yeah, I'm currently using the Tofu controller, but it's not that great. I'd rather use something more Kubernetes native like Crossplane. I agree 100%. I'm biased. But is Crossplane close to graduation? Yes, Crossplane is supposed to graduate anytime now. It was supposed to graduate for London. It didn't. I think that the main reason why it didn't really is because Crossplane is very different from other CNCF projects. It's actually much bigger than most of the other CNCF projects and organized differently, that there was confusion. How do we graduate those things and so on and so forth? But it's in the final steps of graduation. It should graduate anytime now. So yes, very, very soon. Mircea, my main gripe with Crossplane providers that are just wrappers on top of Terraform, at which point it looks like an unnecessary layer of abstraction on top. I guess no. First of all, 2 things. No, because they're transformed from Terraform to something else where you can manage each resource separately from each other, right? Terraform works on a project level, and that's my problem with it, right? So think of the project is sub-project is called Abstract. Think of it more like code generation for Crossplane providers that uses Terraform modules to speed the process, because actually building something based on, let's say, AWS API is a nightmare. It's just horrible. But more importantly, we need to split Crossplane compositions, which is the main reason why anybody uses Crossplane from providers. Hey, if let's say that you're not happy with, let's say you're using Azure, and let's say that you're not happy with the Crossplane Azure provider, right? Cool. Use ASO, Azure Service Operator, right? Use ACK from AWS. Crossplane, the main purpose of Crossplane is to create those interfaces, to figure out how to compose things and so on and so forth. You don't have to use providers. I'm probably 50-50. Probably 50% of my compositions or parts of my compositions are not even using Crossplane providers. You don't have to use it. And especially now with V2, before you never had to use Crossplane providers, but you had to wrap them in the past into Kubernetes object. Now that's also gone. You don't have to use providers. Please separate Crossplane providers from compositions. But in case of needing GitOps for managing infrastructure with a company that already have 100% of its infrastructure built in Terraform, continue using Terraform. Just don't put it in Kubernetes. You don't have to use GitOps for everything. It's not necessary, right? You can, okay, so GitOps, among other things, it's being a pool-based mechanism. Create a cron job in your server that pulls your, or use TerraGrant for that, right? There are other solutions. I'm not sure how GitOps they are, strictly speaking, whether they're always pooling or they're relying on some webhooks, but you don't have to, you can use Terraform, it's fine. You don't have to use Terraform with Argo CD. Other than that, Crossplane kind of feels like writing Terraform code with YAML to me. Crossplane, since maybe 2 years ago or something like that, allows you to write, use functions which allow you to write the controllers in almost any language you want. Python, YAML. I don't use YAML. I don't have a single line of YAML in any of my compositions. I prefer KCL. That's what I use. You can use any. You can define it in any language you want, including YAML. Mustafa. Oh, we're over the time. This is the last one. I'm sorry, everybody. Mustafa, how to address the case when image is running on the cluster for a long time, becoming vulnerable due to newly discovered CVEs? You need to scan it constantly inside of the cluster at runtime. Runtime scanning is potentially more important than static scanning, you know, when you build the images, so on and so forth. There are a bunch of solutions. You need to scan for vulnerabilities at runtime of all the images that are currently running in your cluster. That's the solution. I'm terribly sorry. I did not manage to answer all of your questions. We are out of time. I'm out of breath. Hope to see you all next week on Thursday. Thank you all for coming. This was absolutely awesome. Next week I will have a backup. I will have a guest probably. I might actually have 2 guests. Scott will probably be with us. Scott is absolutely genius. I miss him so much. And we'll have another guest. It's a surprise guest. So see you all next week, next Thursday. Stay good. Learn something. See you next week. Cheers, everybody.